Hi all, sorry for the change of scenery. I am currently traveling for work, but I wanted to take a moment to review this, the Lanbitou 3062. It's a fairly compact fountain pen that's mostly made out of metal, and the design is heavily inspired by the Kaweco Sport. And we'll do a direct comparison between this and that model in just a moment. The top finial has a metal piece, which is conical in shape, and it comes to a point, but it's not very sharp to the fingers. And then the cap starts with a rounded portion that flares up to facets. And at the top of the facets, we do see a clip band with a tension brake in the back. And the clip is bent metal and springy and functional. While that tension band does make it look like this is a removable clip, on my model, it is very tight. The facets then run the entire length of the cap. And on one, we do see the branding, which shows the Lanbitou logo, Lanbitou 3062. And then there's nothing else on the cap. Towards the bottom of the cap, it does transition to a rounded portion with a metal band. The cap comes off in 1, 2, and about a quarter turns to reveal a stainless steel number 5 size nib. It is two-tone in color with a little bit of scroll work, but it's free of any markings. And on the back, we can see the black plastic feed with the fins fully concealed. At the bottom of the feed, we do have a little hole, which is an inlet to draw ink into the pen. The section is fairly short and hourglass in shape, and then we have metal threads, which, while low profile, are a bit sharp to the touch. However, in regular use, I don't really find these bothersome at all. And then the barrel is straight all the way to about this location, at which point we have a step down to the end finial, and that end finial is part of the same piece as the rest of the pen body. And at the bottom of the end finial, we have a rounded portion. In the hand, the pen is compact and has decent heft thanks to the metal construction. It's very well balanced, and for me, it's suitable to use for long writing sessions. But if you have larger hands, it may be a little bit too cramped. And luckily, the cap does post deeply and securely. It transfers the weight just past the crook of my hand, so for me, it is a little bit back weighted. But again, if you have larger hands, that might not be a concern. Before we get into the disassembly of the Lanbitou 3062, I wanted to take a moment here to compare it with a few other fountain pens. Up top, we have the aforementioned Kaweco Sport. I have this one in brass, and we can see the overall design is very reminiscent of the Lanbitou 3062. Also, we can see in its cap form, it is a significantly shorter pen than the Lanbitou. And spoiler alert, that is because the Kaweco Sport does not take a full-size converter, whereas the Lanbitou is able to. And just below that, we have the Pilot E95S, which is one of the most popular pocket-sized fountain pens on the market today. And we can see in its cap form, it is just about the same length as the Lanbitou. Also, the E95S is one of the least expensive gold nib fountain pens that you can buy. Of the pens on the table, the Kaweco Sport is the only one with a fully removable clip, and that clip is optional when you purchase it. The Pilot E95S is the only one with a bent metal clip, and the E95S is only available in resin. The Lanbitou is available only in metal with a few different finishes, and the Kaweco Sport is available in several different types of metal as well as resin. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps removed. All caps, with the exception of the E95S, unscrew. The E95S has a pull-off cap. And in their uncapped forms, the Lanbitou is the longest pen, followed by the E95S, and the shortest pen is the Kaweco Sport. Let's take a closer look at these sections and nibs. Both the Kaweco Sport and the Lanbitou feature stainless steel nibs, and the Pilot features a 14 karat gold nib, which is inlaid into the section. The sections on the Kaweco Sport and the Lanbitou are both hourglass in shape. The Lanbitou is a little bit narrower and longer than the Kaweco Sport, and the threads on the Kaweco Sport are more low profile and flush with the barrel compared to the Lanbitou. And then in contrast, the E95S has a section which has a gradual taper going all the way back to about 2/3 of the pen length. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps posted. All caps post securely and deeply, and in their posted form, the Kaweco Sport is the shortest pen, followed by the Lanbitou 3062, and the longest pen, just by a little bit, is the E95S. In order to disassemble the Lanbitou 3062, no tools are required. The cap unscrews from the pen. And if we take a look inside, we can see the cap starts off with a nylon sleeve, which isn't there to seal off the nib. I think it's most likely there to help prevent scratching on the barrel. If we look deeper inside this cap, we can see there isn't a cap liner. It's all made out of metal in there, and there is a slight step up which seals off the nib. So for cleaning purposes, I would recommend just running this under warm water or soaking it with a little bit of mild detergent. The section can be unscrewed from the barrel, and that's it for the barrel. And there we can see the included full-size converter, which can be pulled right out. And then the nib and feed appear to be held inside a plastic collar, but that collar is not keyed, so there isn't an easy way to remove it. So if you do want to remove the nib and feed, I would just simply try to pull them apart. And then the nib and feed can be separated just like that. And at this point, the pen is fully disassembled. To reassemble, let's start with the nib and feed. The feed doesn't have any ridges or indents to hold the nib, so I would just line it up the best you can. You kind of want to make sure that the shoulders of the nib are in line with the shoulders of the feed. And then we're going to just place that inside the grip section. That looks good. We'll then reattach our converter, followed by our barrel, and lastly our cap. And at this point, we're ready to ink up. Inking up the Lanbitou 3062, today I selected Monteverde Napa Burgundy, which as the name suggests, is a nicely saturated red ink. We'll take the cap off the ink and the pen. Remove the back barrel. Make sure the piston is extended all the way down in the converter, and in this case it already is. Submerge the nib into the ink and screw up the converter. In order to get a full fill, I'm going to expel the ink and then draw it up one more time. That looks like a nice full fill. We'll go ahead and wipe off the grip section as well as the nib. Cap up our ink bottle. Put the barrel back on the pen. Followed by the cap. And we're ready to write. Okay, writing with the Lanbitou 3062. Cap unscrews, and I'm not going to post it. And the nib is not marked, but if I were to guess, it's probably a medium, and it is made out of stainless steel. And it is a really well-tuned nib. It's smooth, it's wet, it's maybe a little bit stiff, but many steel nibs are quite stiff, and honestly, I think that is a good thing for many occasions, especially for quick notes. Our ink. is Monteverde. Napa Burgundy. That's a D in there. In terms of flex, as I mentioned, it's a pretty stiff nib. You can push out maybe a little bit of line variation, but not much. And for reverse writing, actually quite smooth. And the feed really kept up just fine, so I would say if you're in a pinch for a thinner line, you can certainly consider reverse writing. So what do I think of the Lanbitou 3062? I'm a big fan of this pen. I find that its overall form factor is both attractive and very comfortable. If you have medium or smaller hands, it's perfectly suitable to use for both short notes and long writing sessions unposted. And if you have larger hands, it's probably suitable for short notes, but you can post the cap deeply and securely without any issue to make a pretty substantial size fountain pen. And while it is a fairly compact pen, I would say it probably is within the pocket pen category. It also is able to hold a full-size converter, which is quite impressive, and honestly one of the big deterrents for owning a Kaweco Sport. You see, in contrast to this pen, the Kaweco Sport is a lot more compact, but because it's so much more compact, it's stuck either using international short cartridges or an optional converter, which is a push-pull style converter, and it holds half of the ink that an international short cartridge is able to hold, which is a very dismal amount. And on top of that, while this pen is affordable, it also has a very well-tuned nib, so that is a very pleasant surprise. Now, with that being said, there is room for improvement with this pen, and probably the biggest deterrent to it is the fact that it is so heavily inspired by the Kaweco Sport. However, I think that there is enough difference between these two designs that it is a fairly novel item, albeit not fully novel because it does have a lot of similarities. Also, as I mentioned during the design overview, the cap posts securely and deeply, but the cap is quite heavy, I think largely due to this clip in the back. And that weight backweights the pen for me with medium-sized hands. I think it probably isn't an issue for larger hands, but medium and smaller hands, it's not the most comfortable experience in the world. On top of that, as I showed during the disassembly, there isn't a cap liner in this pen. And typically that's not an issue, especially if you have a plastic pen. But if you have a metal cap and a metal section, those two will not interfere and provide a good seal. And what that means is over time, the pen will experience dry out issues. And actually, I found that the nib and feed tend to stay quite wet, which is really a testament to that design. But what ends up drying up is the ink inside the converter at a much faster rate than the majority of my other pens that are cartridge converter pens. So that's probably the Achilles heel for me with this pen. The other issue that I have with this pen, which is kind of juvenile, but I can't help and see this, is the logo for Lanbitou. Hopefully you can pick it up pretty well. I think it's probably supposed to be a pyramid or something along those lines. But for me, with these horizontal lines, I can't help but look at this and think of the poop emoji. But with that being said, outside of the logo, I do think it is a very attractive pen, and it's very affordable with an extremely well-tuned nib, which is very hard to find in this market. And overall, I think that it is really a great pen for people who want the Kaweco Sport, but maybe steer away from it because it is so compact or because it has such a limited ink supply. If that is one of the reasons you don't want a Kaweco Sport, but you do really enjoy the design of that pen, then this really suits the bill. And that just leaves me to say, thank you for watching.